The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 2. Part 2. The first time Dioruz spoke he was not paid much attention, but the third attempt accompanied by some great blows with a thick oak cane on the table there was silence in the room. Murtani showed his support for the action of Dioruz by making a gesture with his right hand demanding a little silence and attention. When the ambient sound was low enough and most of those present were already focused on Murtani. Then, once there was silence, Murtani began to speak. Dear neighbors, only those of us who are quite old like me know the threat that is to our beautiful village this plague that we are suffering, but with an aggravating fact as most of you already know, and that is the fact that Loaf is not here with us, since he has not returned from his last trip, and that the weight of this burden falls all on our young neighbor Arian. Murtani pointed his finger at her, which caused people to put their eyes on her, which blushed at the young woman who lowered her head. Although their work is excellent, it is not enough, since as we know this plague makes relapses more serious than the first time the disease is contracted. Many of the village's longest-lived applauded when Murtani finished with this part of the speech. Arian had heard of the Great Plague that had occurred more than 40 years ago. Before the plague, Caesarea was a thriving population of more than 5,000 inhabitants after barely exceeding 500,000. That is why Caesarea in the eyes of a visitor was a huge population, but many of the houses on the periphery were in ruins, especially those that were located on the coast. The survivors decided to live in the center of Caesarea. Barely some families lived in the hills outside Caesarea. As soon as that plague only remained, apart from the ruins, the so-called Hill of Memories, a large mass grave where almost all those affected were buried and where there was a stone monolith dedicated to the goddess Thani begging for mercy. Murtani asked the highest outsider to stand at his side. The people stood silently waiting for the words of the council president. As I knew the seriousness of the threat that was presented to us and seeing that the situation did not improve, I organized an expedition formed by a group of volunteers formed by some of the most promising young people of our beloved Caesarea. Their mission was to seek help from the populations of the south, and so they left in secret, before dawn. But then the gods heard our pleas, and by chance they met this magician who is here next to me. His name is Selan Demir, and his partner Dariso Gilla, who is sitting next to us. Both come from the city of Tripulia where, as many of you know, our neighbor Nilam is located. You must know that these two wizards belong to the Great Order of White Robes. They have told me that they will help us eradicate the plague, since in the south they have suffered it for many years, but they have overcome it and know an effective remedy against the plague. When Murtani announced this, the people gave applause and cheers to the magicians and Murtani. The president of the council was satisfied by the ovation, then indicated silence again with a gesture of his right hand. I have also been told that your order intends to have a permanent headquarters in the north, since many of its members go deeper and deeper into this area because there are a series of ruins very interesting to them and our population is suitable to house it. Not only its magicians but also clerics and priests, which would mean that we would not be alone again in case of an emergency like this. The audience again applauded this unexpected news about a delegation of magicians in Caesarea. Murtani and the magicians sat in their places. Again it was Dioruz's turn to speak, indicating that this was the end of the assembly and that everyone should leave the council room. With a bit of disappointment the audience left the place to go back to their own business. Arian began to leave the room, but Dioruz quickly went to where she was and told her amicably not to leave the room since the council wanted her to meet with them again. Since it was the desire of the two magicians to ask him some things about the symptoms of the plague and the treatment he was administering to those affected. Arian then remained in the room until it was empty and Dioruz closed the door. There was only her, the wizards, and the council members. The young woman approached them. Now she could observe the wizards more closely. Selan talked animatedly with Murtani over a beer. He was tall and thin with a neat appearance that indicated he belonged to a high social class. The other wizard looked more unkempt and his nervous gaze was focused on Arian, which made her uncomfortable. Once the council members made sure their guests were taken care of in terms of food and drink, they disappeared from the room, leaving the three experts alone. That surprised the young lady, who didn't expect to deal with them directly. They were left alone. It seemed that neither wanted to start the conversation. Selen ate some bread. The other wizard continued to watch Arian, who remained defensive. There was something about the wizards that he did not like. When Selen seemed satiated, he fixed his attention on Arian, gave him a friendly smile and with a gesture invited the young woman to sit next to him. Arian accepted suspiciously and sat down, while the other magician took a seat in front of him while still looking at her. "Forgive our manners, my name is Selen Demir and my partner is called Darius Ogilla." Both magicians bowed their heads slightly in a topical greeting from the southern travelers. "Delighted, my name is Arian and I'm from here, Caesarea." The wizards didn't speak for an instant and again it was Selen who spoke. "Are you the one who has taken care of these people during the plague outbreak?" "Yes, sir, for more than a month, but most of the sick are mild, although there are relapses and they get much worse." "Oh, yes. We already know this terrible plague. In my country we call her the Eternal Mother-in-law, since once she arrives she seems to leave but never finishes leaving home." Saying this, he could not help but let out a smile. "That is, the disease is caught and cured. Within a week the symptoms appear again, but much more seriously and progressively, again and again until the patient dies from exhaustion." Selen was calm and seemed to know the disease very well and how to treat it. "I hope not to be inconsiderate, but in my opinion it does not seem anything serious. Instead of a plague it seems something like an intoxication, since most people appeared with symptoms at the same time and there was no time for contagion as usually happens in pestilent diseases." Saying this, the two wizards frowned and exchanged a glance with each other without saying anything to the young girl. Selen remained silent and for a moment seemed to hesitate, but her tone of voice was firm. "It is a plague, trust us. What happens is that it is very contagious and the first symptoms are very mild. Surely you are infected but have not yet manifested virulently." Selen accompanied his words with a conciliatory smile, but Arian was not convinced by the magician's explanations and could not hide on his face an expression of suspicion at his words. "What is your teacher's name?" asked authoritatively the other magician, Darius, who had not opened his mouth in the whole conversation. Now I was asking him about a totally different topic than the one they were talking about. "Loaf," replied Arian, surprised. "How long ago did you leave Caesarea?" "For months ago, I think. He went south to settle some issues." "What issues?" Darius' attitude was quite aggressive, while Selen seemed amused by her partner's questioning of the young woman. "I don't know, he just left," Arian answered without leaving his surprise. "Did you know where it came from? Do you know what he was doing here? Do you know something? Or you were just a silly goofy student who laughed thank you?" Arian was afraid. Darius was beside himself and had stood up while saying those words with a threatening air. "Ha ha, ha ha." A laugh from Selen sounded at the scene. "Calm, Darius. What does she know about her teacher? Surely nothing. You already know Loaf. She knows how to look for life very well and say only what suits her." Selim took Darius to the door, inviting him out of the room. "Don't worry, I'll talk to her. I'm sure that when she knows the truth she will attend to reasons. Go for a walk." Selen dismissed Darius by patting him on the back in a conciliatory manner. The young girl and the wizard were left alone. Selen came to Arian's side and spoke to him with a conciliatory tone. "What character, excuse us, are nervous. Loaf deceived us long ago in another matter that does not concern now to deal. Darius and I intend to find it to clarify some aspects that at that time remained unfinished." "Did you know Loaf?" Arian was surprised. Selen sat back on the chair and smiled slightly at the young lady's surprised face. Yes, we know each other. Loaf also belonged to the Order of the White Robes. We both traveled the entire coast of the Eternal Sea, both eastern and western, in search of adventure and knowledge. We were much younger than your master, but we were like brothers, until one day Loaf deceived us and left us lying around. He abandoned the order and disappeared. Finding his trail here has been pure coincidence. Our trip was to conduct a study for our order, and the last thing we expected is to find the place where Loaf hid all these years. You talk about Loaf as if he were a criminal. What did he do? Arian did not believe that Loaf was capable of doing evil acts. Nothing, calm. That is not concerning our current goal, which is to cure the plague that threatens the inhabitants of this place. It's a thing of the past, but both I and Doris would appreciate it if you could tell us something about Loaf's activities here at Caesarea. Selin was kindness in person. Nothing at all. I don't know anything, I promise you. Here he only did routine tasks, nothing more. I almost never saw him exercise magic. Arian tried to be as convincing as possible, but Selin couldn't hide her disappointment with a subtle gesture of rage on her face, but remained silent. When he seemed to regain control and relax, he spoke again. Good, because you want it. But I think it is better that you tell us what you know. Although he trusted that over time you will change your mind, you can leave and we will call you when we need your services. They said goodbye in a cold and speechless manner. Arian left for his little house in the hills. Along the way he couldn't help but see the distant silhouette of someone who followed him with his gaze at a great distance. It was a hooded man wearing a white robe. Arian couldn't help but imagine Doris staring furiously at her from afar. He came home, picked up some clean clothes, and returned to little Liana to see her condition and stay with her for the night. The little girl was almost fully recovered from the disease, but still felt a little weak. Arian insisted that she stay in bed. The next morning Arian woke up abruptly. They were knocking on the door of the house, screaming and calling the little girl to open the door. He heard, "A miracle," they exclaimed a lot. "They have cured us," they told him from the outside. The girl couldn't resist the insistence of the people outside, and opened the door before Arian had time to react. They entered the house, more than a dozen neighbors, all of them the previous day. Arian had found them convalescing from the plague in a more or less serious way. Now they showed an unbeatable appearance and a vital and cheerful attitude. Liana approached the group. An elderly woman offered the little girl a small glass bottle containing a green liquid. The girl looked suspiciously at the contents of the container, but all the neighbors encouraged her to drink the contents. As soon as Liana drank, the concoction took effect immediately. The color of her face recovered its pink tone, leaving the pallor of the past. Seeing the recovery, everyone returned to cheer and speak wonders about the potion that the magicians had prepared as soon as dawn, and that they had distributed house by house. And that the magicians said was an effective remedy against the plague, and by the results it was something certain. Arian had to recognize that Liana was fully recovered from the disease. Like many of the newly healed, they were invited to go out to celebrate that the plague had finally subsided. Arian could not refuse and accompanied Liana on her journey through the streets of Caesarea. Everyone was happy and content, and the weather was good as the day was splendid again, and even towards a fairly pleasant temperature. Their walk took them to the main square, where Arian could see Murtani talking to Selin. The two were sitting on one of the benches that surrounded the water fountain that was in the main square. He also observed that both maintained a serious expression. The couple stopped talking when they noticed the presence of the young woman. The trio exchanged glances, but only Murtani showed a worried gesture. Although he remained silent, the two men got up and went to one of the small taverns that were in the square. Arian diverted his attention to some girls who demanded his attention. In the afternoon, when Arian, after eating and was about to go with Liana to pick some roots in one of the nearby mountains, appeared a boy, one of Murtani's nephews, who gave him a written note in Murtani's handwriting. "Arian, please come as soon as possible to the tower. We have worrying news about Loaf. Greetings. Murtani." As soon as he finished reading the note, he went to the seat of the council, while he could not imagine what could have happened to Loaf. When she entered the tower, she did not expect to find the entire council sitting waiting for her, and Selen sitting next to Mertani. The magician was sitting in the place that Loaf used to occupy in the meetings. Arian began to suspect about what the real intentions of this meeting were, and even more so when Darius was not present in the room. Mertani invited the young woman to sit in a chair placed right in front of the council. Arian took a seat calmly, showed great calm, without losing Mertani's gaze. It was an interrogation without a doubt, and Loaf would be the central subject. Selen was calm and fiddled with his fingers, totally indifferent to the young woman, as if this situation was not with him when it was clear that he was the main instigator. Mertani took the floor, got up from his seat to give himself more importance. Council members, we must first be grateful and thank Selen and Darius for having delivered us so efficiently from the terrible plague that loomed over our beloved Caesarea. At the end of these words, the rest of the members of the council applauded, but Mertani appeased them with a gesture with both hands to stop, once there was continuous silence with his dissertation. However, these magicians have not only saved us from the plague but also think they know the reason why this plague has fallen on us. At this affirmation among the members of the council, only murmurs were heard and all showed gestures of surprise. Mertani ignored. Unfortunately, who can give us a clue about his origin refuses to collaborate with our distinguished guests, but does so without knowledge, since he does not know that who has been his teacher has actually been deceiving us all these years of residence as our dearest neighbor. More surprise among all, but the most surprised was Arian. Certainly did not expect Mertani's statement about his former advisor, but Mertani continued to speak, ignoring all the commotion caused. She does not know, hopefully, that her master was a renegade of the White Robes. He was expelled from the order because he sought knowledge in rituals forbidden by the Great Magic Council. But not only that, long ago Loaf deceived these two great magicians in the course of a trip, stealing a magical object, and that surely brought it here, to our town, hiding it. This object can be the cause of our misfortunes, since that object is cursed and brings evil to the place where it is, unless proper protection spells are performed. The new revelation caused the murmurs to turn into shouts of surprise. The bustle and indignation were very great among the members of the council. Arian, although Mertani's statements took her totally by surprise, did not lose her composure and maintained a serene and calm gesture. Mertani began to use an authoritarian tone and expressly addressed Arian. That is why the magicians have asked us to communicate this advice to our dear neighbor Arian to help them in their task by answering all their questions as a thank you for their great help with the plague. There was a silence in the ward. Everyone's eyes fell on the young girl again. Selen, without saying a word, stood up and walked towards Arian with long determined steps. I keep silent for a few minutes. I wait for the audience to be impatient to speak.